Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you the stories that matter from across the world, shining a light on the biggest issues and controversies. I'm Kerry Johnston, live from the Firstpost studios. In a moment, the latest from the conflict in West Asia. But first, a look at the day's other headlines. US President Donald Trump says the country's relationship with Britain is not what it used to be. This comes after UK Prime Minister Starmer initially held off giving military support to the strikes against Iran. NATO says it's open to discuss an expansion of its nuclear arsenal after French President Emmanuel Macron vowed to increase its stocks of nuclear warheads. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's government delays parliamentary voting on a bill that would separate the roles of Attorney General and Public Prosecutor as the opposition demands reforms in the country's judiciary. India approves over $550 million in funding for the purchase of 6 advanced light helicopters for the Coast Guard and surface-to-air missiles for the Navy. And Nepal enters a 2-day silence period following the end of the election campaign ahead of the crucial day of voting on March the 5th. The war that began with US-Israeli strikes on Iran over the weekend is now echoing far beyond Iranian borders. Overnight, 2 drones struck the US embassy in Riyadh. Inside the heavily guarded diplomatic quarter, smoke rose, a small fire broke out, and the high-end streets of the Saudi capital that are usually busy with diplomats fell silent. The US Embassy in Saudi Arabia has told Americans to avoid the embassy until further notice. Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said 8 additional drones were intercepted near Riyadh and Al-Kharj. At the United Nations, Saudi Arabia's ambassador spoke on behalf of Arab nations that are currently facing a barrage of Iran's retaliatory attacks.
The Arab group condemns in the strongest possible terms the Iranian attacks targeting the state of Qatar, the Kingdom of Bahrain, the state of Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the Sultanate of Oman. It considers these attacks a grave violation of international law, a flagrant breach of the Charter of the United Nations, and a direct aggression against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of these states.
Israel says it intercepted a large wave of missiles launched from Iran just after midnight. Defense systems lit up the skies over Jerusalem, Tel Aviv and Haifa. Flares streaked upwards from the West Bank city of Hebron. The Israeli military said it was working continuously to neutralize incoming threats. As Iran's retaliation widens, explosions have been reported across the Gulf. In Qatar, loud booms shook Doha before dawn. The Qatari military says it intercepted ballistic missiles in the early hours. And later in the day, Iran said its forces launched fresh attacks on a US military base in Qatar, warning that US allies will face an even more intense retaliation. In Bahrain, home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet, authorities say dozens of Iranian missiles and attack drones were intercepted. At least 1 person has been reported killed. And in the United Arab Emirates, Australia confirmed its military headquarters at Minhad Air Base just south of Dubai was hit over the weekend. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., US President Donald Trump outlined America's war aims.
Minister, our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon. Never going to have a nuclear weapon. I said that from...
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio claimed that regime change was not the main focus of the ongoing Israeli-American offensive.
We would not mind, we would not be heartbroken, and we hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government and establish a new future for that country. We would love for that to be possible. But the objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and of their naval capabilities.
And then there's energy. An Iranian Revolutionary Guards general has threatened to burn any ship navigating the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point for global oil and gas shipments, and to attack pipelines to stop exports entirely. So what began as US-Israeli strikes on Iranian soil has now triggered retaliatory attacks stretching from Riyadh to Doha, from Manama to Dubai. Embassies are on alert, military bases are under fire, oil routes are threatened, and civilians across the Gulf are waking up to the sound of air defenses and sirens. This is no longer a contained confrontation. It's an expanded war unfolding in real time with no visible signs of de-escalation. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Siavush Ranjbar-Demi, live from St Andrews in Scotland, senior lecturer in modern Middle Eastern history. Welcome to the programme. If I ask you first, if I may, what do you think is the US-Israel strategy here? Is there actually a plan for what might happen next, even if the Iranian regime should fall?
Well, we don't see really a combined or a coherent plan emerging, as your segment showed. The Americans seem keen on pushing back on Iran's missile and nuclear capabilities, trying to destroy them. It's unclear whether they're really pushing for regime change any longer. Israel, on the other hand, keeps attacking installations across Tehran and other cities. We've had, for example, the presidential building and other central government buildings being hit between last night and this morning. Remember, these are historical buildings. Even the Golistan Palace that goes back to the Qajar dynasty was damaged yesterday. And these historical palaces predate the Islamic Republic and the Revolution of 1979. And of course, police stations and more, and all sorts of infrastructure is being destroyed. So this sort of points more towards regime destruction rather than regime change. It'll be very difficult for any administration, be it under the Islamic Republic or any other alternative administration, to pick up the pieces and to run the country if all this infrastructure is being destroyed. And many of these buildings obviously have been long evacuated. So it's very unclear why this sort of pattern of destruction is, what sort of gain will Israel have in this military campaign from this pattern of destruction. And of course, at some point, maybe the intention here is to pave the way for that uprising that particularly the Israelis are banking on. But again, as civilian casualties are piling up again, and we've seen some very distressing images of further deaths among civilians, even amongst children, it is unclear whether that will exercise minds and will persuade people to go for this uprising whenever it's called by Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah, you mentioned Israel there. I mean, what do you make of the timing of this attack on Iran? Because, I mean, last year when it seemed the deal might be close, Israel attacked. That action seems to have been repeated again.
Yes, Israel doesn't seem to have a schedule which has any sort of coordination with nuclear diplomatic negotiations. It has never been a party of these negotiations, so whether it was the nuclear deal of 10 years ago or the current, both times interrupted because of war, negotiations between Iran and the US in 2025 and now. So it seems to operate entirely on its own schedule. It appears to have had a window of opportunity to assassinate Khamenei and the senior officials on Saturday, and it simply went for that. And there are indications on the American side that America toed along. Once Israel attacked, it attacked too because of preempting, if you want, the very likely Iranian retaliation. So we go back to this point that a negotiated settlement in this crisis between Iran and the US and these other Western countries, or even these Arab states now, as the conflict has enlarged, will always be subject to the fact that Israel will not be part of it, and Israel is a very key belligerent here.
So given what you say then, I mean, how difficult will it be to contain this when you consider that Iran is also sort of targeting the Gulf states as well?
Well, this was part of a strategy that Iran had messaged over the years. If there was an attack against the top echelons of the Islamic Republic from Khamenei down, this would be the response, attacking American installations all over the region, trying to close the Strait of Hormuz. So in this sense, it's not a surprise. It needs to be This is a key difference with regards to the past and in terms of the extent to which Iran is really waging this multi-pronged offensive. And Iran has never done this in its military history, and very few other countries actually have done it. So it really is a big unknown in terms of how long this can be sustained. But for the moment, this seems to be the Iranian strategy, and they've really settled on this.
And is purely air power enough to prompt a successful and peaceful change of government without some kind of force being needed on the ground, boots on the ground, as it were?
No, of course it's not. And this destruction of infrastructure also makes it very difficult for, remember, the dissenting voices which existed in Iran prior to all this crisis happening. People like the Nobel Prize winner Narges Mohammadi, the dissident politicians Mustafa Taqiyzadeh, Mir Hossein Mousavi, who had long called for an end to the Islamic Republic through a referendum and through a political transition. Those voices will have been drowned out now by obviously the fog of war and the destruction and whatever comes next, obviously, and a very weakened Islamic Republic in crisis, and it needs to choose its leader, and if of course it can survive. So I would say the first casualty of this conflict from a political point of view has been also the possibility of these sort of dissidents and civil society activists that have long been active in Iran being able to steer the country in some way towards a gradual transition. I think that scenario is fading.
Okay, we'll leave it there, Siavash Ranjbar. Demi, we appreciate your expertise and for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, fresh developments are emerging from Iran as no side appears to be backing down. Israel launched a new wave of airstrikes inside Iran, targeting key military assets in and around the capital, Tehran. The Israeli Air Force says it's conducting multiple operations aimed at dismantling Iran's air defense network. They've targeted radar installations, missile launchers, and personnel operating Iran's defense systems. On the ground, the impact has been immediate. 4 powerful explosions were heard just after midnight. The blasts shook residential apartment windows. The UNESCO-listed Golestan Palace in Tehran has also been damaged. Smoke was seen rising from Tehran's historic center, as well as eastern parts of the city. Reports claim that the country's old parliament building was also hit by airstrikes. The Israeli military claimed that it had targeted a broadcast center located in the Evin district of northern Tehran. Israel said it also targeted Iran's presidential complex in Tehran, describing it as the regime's most central and significant headquarters. Israel also says it targeted an institution involved in training Iranian military officers, along with additional key government infrastructure within the compound. According to reports, the US military has struck more than 1,250 targets within the first 48 hours of the operation. US Central Command, which oversees American military operations in the region, said it destroyed facilities belonging to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. These included command and control centers, air defense systems, anti-ship systems, and airfields. And President Trump warned that American military action against Iran could continue for more than a month. Trump also defended the strikes as a necessary security measure.
An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat to the Middle East, but also to the American people, our country itself.
Trump also outlined his 4 main objectives of the military attack: destroying Iran's missile capabilities, weakening its navy, preventing it from developing a nuclear weapon, and curbing its support for regional militant groups. However, he didn't clarify if regime change is part of the strategy. Iran has responded with strong rhetoric. It's threatened to attack any vessel attempting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global route for oil and gas shipments, which has now been closed. Iran also warned that oil prices could surge dramatically if it blocks exports. Meanwhile, Iran's atomic energy chief has claimed a nuclear facility in Natanz was hit in 2 strikes. Civilian casualty figures are also rising. The Red Crescent Society said at least 555 people have been killed across Iran in joint US-Israeli strikes. The targets hit in 131 towns and cities. As questions grow over how long this conflict could last, well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pushed back against fears of a prolonged war.
I hear the people are saying we're going to have an endless war here. I said it could be quick and decisive. It may take some time, but it's not going to take years. It's not an endless war. In fact, it's an effort right now to achieve the peace that we all yearn and pray for. And I think together we'll achieve it.
Well, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, however, said the timeline depends entirely on Donald Trump's direction, with the Pentagon prepared to carry out the mission for as long as required.
President Trump has all the latitude in the world to talk about how long it may or may not take. 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 6 weeks. It could move up. It could move back. We're going to execute at his command the objectives we've set out to achieve.
Washington has also been clarifying its position. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the primary mission of this operation is targeting Iran's missile and naval capabilities. When asked if diplomacy is still possible, Rubio refused to share any details, but said that the hardest hits are yet to come.
So two things, and two things can be true. Number one is our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping. That's our objective.
As Israeli forces continue their strikes across Iran and the United States sharpens its rhetoric, West Asia remains on edge. And of course, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest. Well, as US-Israeli attacks on Iran continue, President Trump has addressed questions about American military readiness. In a post on Truth Social, Trump insisted the United States has a good supply of its most advanced weapons.
The United States munitions stockpiles have, at the medium and upper medium grade, never been higher or better. As was stated to me today, we have a virtually unlimited supply of these weapons. Wars can be fought forever, and very successfully, using just these supplies, which are better than other countries' finest arms. At the highest end, we have a good supply, but are not where we want to be.
Well, Trump's remarks come as the conflict in West Asia continues to expand, and they raise a broader question about military capability. So how does the US military stack up against Iran's firepower? Well, Iran is ranked 16th globally in military power. The United States remains first. Iran has more than 600,000 active military personnel and 350,000 reservists. The US has about 1.3 million active duty troops and roughly 800,000 reserves. The numerical advantage lies with Washington. The difference is sharper in defense spending. Iran's last annual defense budget was close to $15 billion, while the United States spent close to $900 billion. That money translates into equipment, technology, and training. This leads Trump to believe that America will prevail over Iran no matter what.
Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their Navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon.
America also has the upper hand in air power. The US operates more than 13,000 aircraft. Iran has just over 500. The US fleet includes advanced fighter jets, long-range bombers, surveillance aircraft, and drones. Iran's air force is significantly more limited in range and technology, given that they operate mostly Soviet-era aircraft, and the ones bought from the US before the 1979 revolution. On land, Iran has over 1,700 tanks and more than 65,000 armored vehicles. The US has around 4,600 tanks and nearly 392,000 armored vehicles. And at sea, the United States maintains approximately 440 naval assets, including 11 aircraft carriers and more than 80 destroyers. Iran has just over 100 vessels. It does not operate aircraft carriers or destroyers. However, it does have fast attack craft and submarines designed for operations in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Overall, then, the United States retains clear advantages in air power, naval strength, technology, and defense spending. The current phase of the conflict in West Asia is now testing to what extent those advantages translate into sustained military operations. Moving on now, the Afghanistan-Pakistan border conflict continues to escalate. Fresh explosions were reported in Kabul as violence flared once again. Multiple blasts echoed across the Afghan capital as anti-aircraft weapons and heavy gunfire were heard from several parts of the city. The Taliban government clarified that Afghan forces carried out anti-aircraft fire, targeting a fresh incursion by Pakistani aircraft over Kabul. The Afghan Defense Ministry said that the fighting is still ongoing against Pakistani troops. And in a separate attack, an explosion was reported near a military installation in Afghanistan's key city of Kandahar. This comes after a Pakistani jet was spotted flying over the southern city. The confrontation began 2 weeks ago after Afghanistan launched a border offensive in response to Pakistani airstrikes. Well, since then, the border region has remained tense and volatile.
The Pakistan military conducted an intelligence-based selective operation against 7 camps belonging to the Pakistani Taliban, also known as Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, and its affiliates. An affiliate of the Islamic State group was also targeted in the border region.
Well, located near that main border crossing of the Afghan side, the residents of Torkham reported clashes between both sides. The Taliban government claims that at least 39 civilians have been killed over the last 2 weeks. It underscores the growing human cost of the conflict. On Saturday, Pakistan said it was in an open war with Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the Taliban called for dialogue.
We have repeatedly emphasized a peaceful solution and still want the problem to be resolved through dialogue. Right now, Pakistani planes, reconnaissance aircraft, are flying over Afghanistan's airspace.
The Pakistani military, backed by artillery and air power, struck installations deep inside Afghan territory overnight. Islamabad has claimed a total of 415 Afghan Taliban militants have been killed and over 580 others wounded in ongoing border clashes. They further added that they destroyed 102 Afghan posts and captured 22 others. It also claimed that 163 tanks and armoured vehicles were destroyed. However, Kabul has rejected Islamabad's figures. The Afghan government said 55 Pakistani soldiers have been killed. Pakistan has long accused Afghanistan of sheltering Pakistan militants. It blamed Kabul for a surge in cross-border attacks, a charge Afghanistan denies. Land border crossings have mostly remained closed since the deadly October clashes that left more than 70 people dead on both sides. When a Qatari-brokered ceasefire paused the fighting, the truce largely held, but talks in Istanbul in November failed to produce a formal peace agreement. So with both Afghanistan and Pakistan trading blame and bullets, the region is bracing for what could turn into a prolonged and dangerous confrontation. That's all we have time for on the show today, but stay with us on First Post as we continue to track the conflict in West Asia. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on First Post.
They promised glory. They delivered fear. They shaped nations. They scarred generations. From brutal purges to propaganda machines, from stolen power to violent falls from the throne. Welcome to The Dictator, a series that strips away the myth and then exposes the men behind the tyranny. History remembers their power. First Post reveals their truth.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is First Post Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.
The world doesn't fit in boxes, so why should your news? From battlefields to negotiation tables, from internet outrage to real-world injustice. The conversations everyone is having and the ones they're avoiding. It's the same show, but this new year, First Post America gets a new look. I'm Kerry Johnston, and this is First Post America.
Power doesn't end quietly. Some deaths are not accidents. They are messages. A gunshot. A crowd. A country frozen. The killer disappears. The questions don't. This is not just about who died. It's about what followed. Governments fell. Armies moved. History rewrote itself. 5 leaders. 5 moments. One pattern. The assassination.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies. Shedding light on the world's top headlines. Detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT. Only on First Post. First Post now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
$36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI,
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktoren,
Hindi,
$30 trillion kakarjo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
4 兆ドル以上の
Portuguese,
por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select the language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. First Post.
They promised glory